held in accordance with Freedom of Information Act. The news media has been notified, and a copy of the agenda has been made available to the public. This meeting is open to the public, and the public is welcome to attend in person. All persons wishing to attend the meeting by virtual means may do so via YouTube Sumter School District Board Meetings and Sumter School District's Facebook page. Vision. Sumter School District is committed to educating, empowering, and enriching the lives of all students to reach their full potential. Mission. Sumter School District is committed to providing a safe, nurturing, and high-quality educational environment that supports diversity and equips students for local and global success. The board members are yours truly, Barbara Jackson, Area 7 Chairwoman, Dr. J. Frank Baker, Seat 8 Vice Chair, Dr. Darrell McGaney, Area 5 Clerk, Mr. Brian Alston, Area 1, Mrs. Cheryl Ray, Area 2, Mr. Mac McLeod, Area 3, Dr. John Hilton, Area 4, Dr. Gloria Lee, Area 6, Dr. Sean Reagan, Seat 9, Ms. Denise Jones, Shaw Air Force Base Representative, Dr. Penelope Martin Knox, our Superintendent, and Amy Hanson, our Administrative Manager. This meeting is now called to order. Welcome to Willow Drive Elementary School. I want to thank Principal Jacqueline Thomas and her staff for hosting this meeting. As the school year comes to a close, we recognize this time to celebrate the outstanding accomplishments of our students and staff through the end of the year celebration, award ceremony, and the commencement ceremonies. Congratulations to the class of 2022. We hope that you have all great things in your path, and this is the beginning of a beautiful journey, and we wish you nothing but success. Are there any objections to the approval of the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Trustees, are there any announcements? I skipped 3.1? Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. At this time, will the Director of Teacher Quality, Mrs. Sherry Boozer, please come forward to present our teachers who earned and renewed National Board certification. I'm sorry.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
We are proud to announce that we have one new and only National Board teacher, and we're very proud of her in light of the pandemic and the resilience that she's shown. And I don't see her, Gabrielle Prosser. In addition to that, we actually have 3 National Board certified teachers who either maintain or renewed. And at this time, I'm going to call Ann LeGrand from Wilder Elementary to come forward. We want to recognize you for all of your hard work.
Thank you.
And especially during this time of doing this. And this is a hard work to achieve. And so we thank you for just showing that out of about 300. You have maintained that, and we're certainly proud of you. So great job.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And the certificate reads, Certificate of Achievement. This certificate is awarded to Anne LeGrand in recognition of renewing National Board certification. Awarded this day of May 23rd, 2022. Yours truly, Barbara Jackson and Dr. Martin Knox.
Thank y'all. We appreciate it. I appreciate it. I'm one of two that have it in my field. I teach phys ed, and I'm at the elementary level, so there's just two of us in my area, so it's exciting. Oh, open it back up. Sorry. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you. Thank you, Cherie. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
We have two other teachers. They are not here, but we do want to read their names. Dr. Jarnell Atkins from Kingsbury Elementary and Ashley Johnson from Alice Drive Elementary that have maintained or renewed their certificate.
Okay, and their certificates read the same as the sponsors.
And Laura Lyles from Alice Drive Elementary. So congratulations.
And again, congratulations to those persons who have received National Board certification for the first time, as well as those that are being renewed. Congratulations. We're very proud of you. And please know that you belong to us, and we do appreciate you because it took hard work to do what you did. And we don't think that we take that lightly. We do appreciate you. Thank you so much. Trustees, are there any announcements?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Ms. Timmons, Ms. Chandler, Ms. Miller, and Ms. Morton at Ebenezer Middle School. On last Thursday, I had the opportunity to not only join them in celebrating our scholars at Ebenezer Middle School that were inducted into the National Junior Honor Society, but I was also able to be their speaker that evening. And it was an awesome privilege just to be there to see our scholars, to know that they've reached such a milestone in their academic careers through a pandemic and despite all the challenges that they may have faced. So I just want to say kudos to Ebenezer Middle School, to their leadership team there, as well as to the newest inductees into the National Junior Honor Society. And at the end of the evening, as a Hillcrest Wildcat, I was inducted as an honorary Ebenezer Tiger. So it's quite an awesome opportunity and accomplishment, so thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Dawson, and kudos to you. Anyone else? Any announcement? Okay, if not, Dr. Hilton, do you have any information to report for the legislative update?
Yes, ma'am. The legislative update is loaded in the board doc, and it's a very lengthy update this time, but it is there for your information and perusal. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Hilton. All right, committee reports. Mr. Reagan, Facilities Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The committee met on last Wednesday at the district office, and we had present Mr. Myers and Mr. Cato as they provided an overview of the district facilities, and they provided that to the committee and the subcommittee. The committee mentioned, or one of the things that we wanted to do moving forward was to request more information regarding possible football field and putting it and placing it on the campus of Crestwood High School. And another thing that we discussed, which would have been a recommendation, would have been to align the facility study with capital projects allocations. And I believe that the Finance Committee shared that as well. And the last recommendation was to request copies of the 2018 facility study that was done and provide a copy moving forward to all of the committee members as well as subcommittee members. That completes the facilities report at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reagan. Dr. Reagan. Sorry, Dr. Reagan. Okay, we're now moving on to the Finance Committee. Mrs. Ray?
Yes, the Finance Committee met on Monday, May the 16th. We reviewed the financial reports for March. We also got an update on the spending of the ESSER funds. And our recommendations, the committee requested that the board ask for an update on salary study. And then we also asked that we get a report of how the capital projects were correlating with the facility study from 2018, so similar to what the Facilities Committee asked for. That concludes the Finance Committee report.
Thank you, Mrs. Ray. Mr. Alston, Policy Committee.
Yes, ma'am. The Policy Committee met on May 12th, and one of the updates was from the Director of Testing Accountability, GT, in Title III, Dr. Moore, in which he informed the Policy Committee that the Insight Education Group has been selected to conduct the equity audit. The original price has been negotiated to $10,000 for the audit to be conducted on a smaller scale. He shared an overview of what this process will entail, which includes the focus groups with various stakeholders and review of qualitative and quantitative data. And if it's pleasing to this body, I would ask that Dr. Moore be given a chance to just give a brief overview of what he presented, because there were some audio issues at the Policy Committee where the public couldn't hear it, if that's fine.
Well, could you finish your report?
Okay.
And then, that might be.
Then we had an update from the Executive Director of Academics, Dr. McLeod, in which she informed the Policy Committee that there were some policies that needed to be updated due to amendments that occurred, which led us into the discussion regarding an audit of our board policy manual, because there are some policies that have not been updated since 2011. We also received an update from our coordinator of attendance, Ms. Addison, provided an update on the open enrollment process, which is taking place until May 31st. She also made a recommendation for the transfer process for employees' children. According to our current policy, employees can apply for an intra-district transfer for a child to attend a school where the parent works. If the grade level is not available, the district may assign the child to the nearest logical assignment. She suggested establishing an employee transfer process for employees to request any school in the district. And our steps moving forward that we wanted to bring before the body this evening is to work with SCASPA for a policy manual audit to update our policies, as well as to establish an employee transfer process for employees to request any school in the district for their children. And at this time, if it's acceptable, could we have Dr. Moore to give an overview of the equity audit process?
Thank you, Dr. Moore. And thank you, Mr. Alston.
All right, good evening to everyone, Dr. Jackson, Dr. Baker, members of the board, Dr. Martin Knox. I'm excited at the meeting, and I'm sorry for the technical issues, but we have worked very tirelessly to get the equity audit done, and so we are excited to be at that moment. The company that we selected is the Insight Education Group. This group is not new to the work of equity. They were founded in the year 2000. They've been around for approximately 22 years. They have done work in South Carolina in several school districts and work with the South Carolina Department of Ed in equity. So we were very excited to start this partnership with them. They gave us two documents to give us an overview of what that process will look like. And one of the documents provided their framework. And Ms. Galloway is pulling it up for you to see. If you would go to slide 3. So the framework that they use is called the Insight Racial Equity Framework. This framework looks at 5 tenets or 5 domains. The equity audit will go through each of those 5 domains. systems, structures, and resources, culture and community of our school district, racial equity in the educator workforce, professional learning and personal growth of our staff members, and curriculum instruction and learning. So the equity audit will go through all of those areas looking for opportunities to address any inequities that it's found. So there's a team of educators that review our data, that talk to stakeholder groups to get insight on perceptions in our communities, and they work with the district to create a strategic plan to start addressing some of the opportunities. Slide 4 kind of talks about those domains a little bit more in detail, but you have this in your handout. If we go to slide 5. So there are 3 different components that happen. There's a document and process review that happens as part of this equity audit. This is where we submit documents to the team. They look at the strategic plan, our equity policy, ACB that we have, our organization chart, different data pieces. Part 2 of that is the stakeholder feedback, and some of this will be happening along the same time frames. And so we'll look at district leaders, school leaders, Board of Education members, community members, getting their feedback on what the perceptions are as it relates to equity. And then we look at quantitative data. That's looking at our budgets, looking at our staffing and student demographics, how our teachers and staff perform. So once they look at all of these different things, they will give us the results of the equity audit. And in the next slide, you'll see what that time frame looks like. So 2 to 3 weeks prior to starting the equity audit, this is when they start coordination with me as the organization liaison. We talk about the purpose and expectations of it, and they develop an engagement schedule. Once that audit happens, we start soliciting stakeholder feedback from the focus groups and surveys that we administer. They analyze our quantitative data that we submit to them, and they continue analyzing that document and process review of our district. 10 to 15 business days after we do the actual audit is when they share the findings through a comprehensive report. And so they will come to the district and share what they found in that report, in the equity audit. And then they'll also share next steps. And what we're hoping is that the partnership will continue so that we can eventually create an equity plan that will support policy ACB. And you also have another document, if you go to the next slide, Ms. Galloway, that will provide all the logistics. So that second document, the liaison overview, will give you exactly who this company will be seeking to meet with as far as the focus groups, and give you more information about the timeline. But roughly, the quantitative data review, we hope to have that done in May and June of this school year. The document and process review, we hope to start it now and probably finish it in the fall. And the qualitative stakeholder focus groups, we plan to get started in the spring and finish in the fall. So we do have a meeting this week with the company to talk about those logistics and scheduling for the rest of the audit. So that was basically where we are in the process, and I will pause if you have any questions for me.
Are there any questions for Dr. Moore?
Yes, you alluded to a handout.
Yes.
We don't have a handout.
It's in board docs.
I can't find it. Where is it in board docs?
The committee reports.
Well, we can't seem to find it on this end of the page.
Go to your committee reports and click on
The
that,
equity.
and that should be the first thing that comes up.
Sumter Comprehensive Equity Audit or Review is what you're looking for.
And so what you'll find in one of the documents, it gives almost like a general overview of the process, and the second document will give you a little more details as to what this process looks like.
Are there any additional questions for Dr. Moore? Thank you, Dr. Moore,
Thank you.
for your update. We appreciate it. And thank you again, Mr. Alston, for your report. Okay, we're now down to the superintendent's report. Dr. Martin Knox, would you please proceed with all items under the superintendent's report?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, Dr. Jackson, Chairwoman, Vice Chairman Dr. Baker, members of the Sumter School District Board, and members of the community. As you can see from the agenda, there is an item 4.1 that is the Code of Conduct, and the purpose of having this item on the agenda this afternoon is just to engage in discussion around student behavior in the Code of Conduct as it pertains to Sumter School District. One of the conversations that I engaged in was with a trustee who had provided me with information regarding an incident that had occurred in our schools. And based on some of the feedback that some of our trustees received, I think it's most appropriate for us to recognize that once trustees receive information, particularly as it pertains to concerns, what the trustees then in turn do as they are dictated by their guidance is to report that information to the appropriate staff, which is me. Once that information is received by me, it is then transferred to the principal, the administrator who's responsible for a grade level for a child or for a particular department, where we look into resolving those issues. I know many of us are looking for board members to provide a response, but board members' responsibility is to provide that information to district staff. And we do receive information and we do engage in those conversations. What I want to do is to share with you correspondence that will be sent out to our community later tomorrow, along with the video that usually accompanies the letters that I send. And the letter sounds similar to this. Sumter School District continues to be committed to the safety and education of all of our students. Essential to this commitment is open communication and transparency with our families regarding safety issues when they arise. As we look to bring the 2021-2022 school year to a close, we want to continue to focus on the innovation, the success, and excitement we've experienced thus far, while continuing to engage in quality instruction and celebrating the accomplishments of our students and staff, while ensuring our students are able to learn in a safe and secure learning environment. Our school community has witnessed cases involving disturbing behavior, such as bullying, fighting, and inappropriate use of social media. What is unfortunate is that cases such as these have been a concern not only in our district, but across the nation and of varying age groups. Researchers have attributed these behaviors to the arrested social-emotional development of our students resulting from the pandemic. The physical disconnect our students experience has manifested into behaviors signaling a need for assistance. Please know that all threats, student altercations, fights, and violent acts are taken very seriously and are thoroughly investigated. As a district focused on educating the whole child, we will continue to provide support to address matters such as conflict resolution through parent conferences, social and emotional support, parental support, while also utilizing public safety resources when necessary. We will continue to work diligently to ensure our schools are safe, orderly, and conducive to learning. Please discuss, and I'll say it again, please discuss with your child, our children, the importance of appropriate behavior at school and emphasize the seriousness of disruptions to the learning environment. Our goal is always to empower our students, allowing them to realize their fullest potential and to thrive. We are encouraging and requesting, and I'll state that again, we are encouraging and requesting that parents, guardians, and members of our community engage in meaningful discourse about making appropriate choices while remaining focused on positive behaviors and refraining from engaging in unsafe and harmful actions that impact our students, families, and our very own Sumter community. As the school year continues to come to a close, and I'm not one who counts the days, but I know there are several who do. I don't know how many days there are because it almost seems like we're trying to get rid of our kids, but we never want to get rid of our kids. Sometimes we just need a breather. Our administrators will continue to enforce the Sumter School District Code of Conduct. We would like to remind our parents and students if they're experiencing difficulties, there are supports available to provide them with assistance. While we know that conflict is a part of life, we as adults must engage in a respectful manner when disagreeing with one another. In closing, I'd like to reiterate that the safety of our students and staff is our #1 priority. I look forward to your continued collaboration and support. Together, we can help ensure a safe learning environment for our schools. And notice throughout that narrative, I talked about us coming together as a community. Oftentimes, we find out about incidents that may have transpired by Facebook. Someone will send a screenshot and say, "Doc, are you familiar with this?" And we're backwardly mapping, spending a lot of time trying to figure out where an incident has transpired when the resources are there. Call the school. Talk to the principal, the assistant principal, counselors, social workers. Call district office staff. Call me. But when we receive information, it's almost like a ghost in the environment, and we're chasing those entities that may or may not exist. We will hold our students accountable, but I need us to also understand that there are laws that govern how we respond to varying situations. If we have students who receive special services, there is a process that is federally governed with how we address those students. And sometimes when we don't see a student disappear, if you will, or still present in a school, it does not, and I repeat, it does not mean that that student is not being addressed. If we're looking at a student who is receiving special support, there is a process where we have to determine if the behaviors are a manifestation of his or her disability. When we're looking at situations that may fall under the category of a Title IX issue, we have to follow those guidelines, and we oftentimes interact with legal professionals who guide us through those situations. I actually have staff here with us today so that if there are questions that may not have been presented or answered in the narrative that I provided, they're here. We have Mr. Kelvin Williams, who's here, who's our hearing officer, Mr. Myers, the Executive Director of Operations. We have Ms. Miller, who's here, who's our Chief Financial Officer, but she also engages in those actions as well as Ms. Tanya Addison, and I do believe there's some others, and Ms. Galloway. And I name those individuals, and Dr. Kumis, just to name a few, because it's not just the responsibility of one person. When a child disrupts the learning environment, it is a matter that is taken seriously, and it's all of us coming together to ensure not only do we disrupt that behavior, but we put supports in place to prevent the behavior from reoccurring again. I often hear the statement, the police need to be in the building. I need us to also understand police are involved when there are criminal matters. Police officers are resources in our schools. When children engage in physical altercations, there are some times where the police are involved and charges will be filed and levied. But police officers are not in the building to arrest children for certain behaviors. And I hear that quite frequently. When we look at the research, we're looking at the research that supports that we must be proactive in responding to the needs of our children. If we do not do it appropriately, we're contributing to that body of work that's called the school to prison pipeline. It has been researched for years, and we have to disrupt that, because what we're doing as a nation is investing more money in prisons than we are in our schools, and therefore we have more children being educated under the auspices of a prison than they are in school. Our responsibility is to educate the whole child. We do not want our schools to be disrupted by any type of inappropriate behaviors, but we as adults also have to take ownership in it as well. I oftentimes talk to parents and they say, why can't I go to my child's school and walk the building? Well, there are incidents that have occurred where we can no longer do that. We have put some precautions in place in one of our schools because of a situation that has transpired. And I'm not knocking anyone, so please don't take it that way. But our objective is to make sure we safeguard our children by any means necessary. It is not to prevent our parents from coming into our schools and watching the educational environment, but it is to safeguard our little people. They are vulnerable. As we turn on the news each and every day, we watch incidents that are occurring across our nation with adults who are not responding appropriately to the stimuli that we've now encountered as a result of the pandemic. Now let's take that and translate that to children. They're trying to navigate their way, and the only way we can do it is in a collective manner. Pick up the phone and call, send an email, we will respond, but we have to, as a community, come together because it impacts us in a negative manner. When those students violate the student code of conduct and it warrants them being sent to Mr. Williams in his office, he takes all of those factors and puts it together, and it's a hearing that's being held. It mirrors a court. We don't want our children in a courthouse. We don't. I don't. But when they engage in those types of behaviors, they do encounter Mr. Williams. And then he has to take all of those factors into consideration, giving the students due process. And again, it depends on whether the student receives special services. If they receive special services, then there's a process even before they get to Mr. Williams. And it could be that the behaviors is a manifestation of that student's disability, and they may not make it to Mr. Williams. And then when we see that child in school again, there's a perception that we've done nothing. Under the Family Educational Rights of Privacy Act or under FERPA, we cannot disclose what we've done with a child. They deserve privacy as well. And so just because we don't see or display what has occurred does not mean nothing has happened. As a mother first, and as a mother of 15,000, but as a leader of 15,000, we will not tolerate disruptive behaviors from children or adults either. And so I need us to understand that we will continue to work collectively as a team, as a board, and as a community to ensure the safety and well-being of our children, both academically and physically and mentally. That concludes that portion of the presentation for 4.1 of the Code of Conduct, Dr. Jackson.
Okay. Are there any questions for Dr. Martin Knox on the Code of Conduct? Yes, Ms. Ray.
Thank you for that explanation. It was very thorough. I do have a question that maybe you can address for all of us. You know, we did have some severe incidents last week, and if you could give some specifics for the board and the public about things that have been put in place now to prevent those things from happening again.
Yes, ma'am. Good question, and thank you for that. I can give you details to a degree without talking about the specific cases, but we had an incident that happened at one of our high schools. And as a result of that matter taking place in the cafeteria, the first thing the principal had to do with the administrative team is to bring some calmness to the school and to ensure students were safe. Students had to be returned back to their classrooms, which disrupted, if you will. When we have an incident that occurs, it disrupts the entire school, not just in that area and not just for those children. So to ensure that our students and our staff were safe, the principal modified the school day to ensure that all the students were in the classrooms where they belong and that the staff were also present. Once there was some normalcy established, then the lunch shifts began to occur. We work very closely with law enforcement, be it the chief or the sheriff's department, and I remain on the phone with them quite frequently. Sometimes when I call, they say, "Okay, Doc, what is it now?" And it's all in fun. But anyway, we have to smile about it to keep from crying about it. But when we had the incident that occurred, the officer in the school called for backup just to make sure that there was some normalcy that was established within the schoolhouse. As a result, the principal and the administrative team have modified the manner in which students access what we call in that school the commons area. They've also modified the way in which students enter and exit the building. And these types of behaviors occur throughout the day, throughout the year, because nothing is soundproof. And we see it all the time, whether it's with TSA, whether it's in the mall, it doesn't matter. There's nothing more annoying than when I go to the mall and I have to stand in a line in a roped off area because they're protecting individuals. I'm sorry about going to the mall, but I just use that as an example about how we continue to adjust. You observe and you recognize where changes need to occur, and that's what has occurred at our high school. And again, the same approach. When we have teachers who are absent, backfilling to make sure that in those hot spot areas, if you will, there's an adult that is present in those areas to prevent our children from going. They're smart. They're going to identify where those pockets are, where they can go and engage in those inappropriate behaviors. And we will continue to monitor, modify, look at the data to determine where those behaviors are occurring to continue to put safeguards in place. In the other school where the other incident occurred, where the unfortunate situation occurred with one of our young students. What we have now put in place at that particular school, before I even picked up the phone to call Mr. Myers to say make sure that electronic door is working and the buzzer is working, he was already on it. And so we had staff already out there checking the electronic system, but that electronic system would not have prevented this from occurring. What we have now put in place, and it's going to be an inconvenience for our parents, is when a parent comes to retrieve a child early, we now have to wait for the attendance clerk to come up to the front office to get the information from the parent, to go back to his or her desk to ensure that it is the appropriate person on the student's emergency contact information, then call the student, and then walk the student back to the front office. So those are just some of the things that we have put in place. There are some of our schools that won't even allow parents beyond that doorway for matters like this that have occurred. And I think it's just pretty ironic that not only did it occur in our school district last week, but I believe that I've read about 5 other incidents that have occurred around the nation, and we continue as a school to refine our practices. So we have safety plans in place where we continue to review them, whether it's executing drills for fire, for 500-foot drills, for emergency, for weather-related, or for, and I'm just going to use the language, for active shooter drills. So now we have to put all these other factors in place. School's no longer that place where we send our children where we don't have to worry. The last thing I would like to do is to have to call a parent to say, I have news for you, and we're not even going to speak that. But it does happen. And so we continue to make sure that we have practices in place. We continue to have that dialogue with our leaders to ensure that we are putting the best practices in place to safeguard the learning environment. But again, the incident the other day, even if the buzzer was in place and it is now being adjusted and modified, we wouldn't have been able to prevent that unless there was an adult that physically walked the child back to the front office. So when you do that, and when we get the phone calls, what are you hiding from me? I'm not hiding anything. We're safeguarding the building. And so those are very good questions about what we do when incidents do transpire. We definitely begin to engage in conversation to say, let's backwardly map to see what we could have done differently. We don't sit back and say, it happened, let's move forward. No, we have to figure out how to prevent it, because if it happened there, it can happen somewhere else as well.
Any additional questions?
Yeah,
Dr.
So-
Hilton?
thank you. So, you said some changes have been made in the procedures at the high school where this incident occurred on last Thursday?
Yes, sir.
And review those changes with me very quickly and succinctly,
Sure.
if you would.
So there's a commons area where students would gather. That area is no longer accessible to students. So in other words, where students were able to go into these areas to experience like
So
college.
they're eating lunch in the classroom?
They're not eating lunch in the classroom. They're just being dismissed in a different capacity. They're being dismissed from school. They're entering into the school in a different capacity. So in the C hallway, for example, instead of dismissing that entire hallway, they're being dismissed by a corridor or by classes to come into those areas so that they can monitor them a little more. Actually, I was there this afternoon to watch dismissal, and that's the other piece. When incidents arise, I'm there. Staff is there. We don't just talk on the phone to disrupt what the principal's trying to do. We're physically in the building to problem solve with our leaders, and we call that coaching. And so I watched dismissal today, and it was executed beautifully. But what we did today and what we've been doing for the last week may not work next week, and we may have to modify it again. But there have been adjustments to the dismissal and the way in which students are mobile throughout the building. Last week, again, the principal decided, we're not utilizing the commons area anymore, so they're not utilizing that common space anymore.
So if I may, I've had numerous concerns about the presence of weapons in the schools.
Okay?
Not saying that somebody saw a weapon, but just that what are we doing to ensure that weapons are not present? And so I saw something in the news about Richland 1, or was it 2? Richland 2 implementing a pilot study on metal detectors. Am I correct in that? Did anybody else see that?
I can't speak to that, but there is another school district in South Carolina that is getting ready to implement metal detectors.
Has there been any discussion in our school district about utilizing some sort of, when you go to when you go to the football game, you get wanded before you come in. You go to the State House, you got to get checked. You go out, lots of places you have to get checked. So has there been any discussion among leadership about the possibility of establishing some sort of a wanding procedure you know, where maybe the person with the ones at this door today and that door tomorrow and the next door another day, or something to just let people know that we are concerned and we're doing something to check on this and discourage that situation to occur of weapons in
Absolutely.
the school.
Yes, sir, and it's a good question. One of the things that we have engaged in, we've been talking about gun safety. In terms of the weapons being present, we received a report last week of a possibility of a weapon, and the first thing I did was I called the sheriff's department, and there was no such weapon. We get reports like that all the time. And we look into them. We don't say that they're fallacies. We look into them. We have had the conversations about metal detectors and wanding. One of the things that comes with the wanding and the metal detectors is manpower, because there's a training that goes along with it. And the officers, we have 3, 4 officers at one of the high schools, and so officers wanding 2,200 kids, it's almost like it has to be done in a random capacity. But we have been having dialogue.
That's what I was asking about,
Yes.
doing some sort of a random thing. You can't wand everybody every
Yes, sir.
day, but
Yes, sir.
you can start checking.
And we have had that conversation, and if you look at, isn't that in your presentation where we had that monies that we had set aside? We have monies that we had set aside because we have had the conversations about metal detectors. And so when you begin to talk about metal detectors, it depends on what your objectives are. There are items now where you don't even need metal detectors to get a weapon inside of the schoolhouse, because now guns aren't the issue, knives are. And it's not necessarily a knife that is metal, it is a makeshift knife of plastic or of the ends of a comb. And so those are the items that are going to be utilized or that are being utilized. If you look at the number of shootings versus stabbings, statistically stabbings are kind of outranking shootings right now. But I do agree with you in terms of the wanding piece. That's conversation that we've engaged in. We've had money set aside, but there's also work out there, bodies of work in school districts that have implemented the wands and or the metal detectors, and they're undoing them now, because it gives off the facade that schools are prisons. And so, again, this is where we come in together collectively as a community. As we send letters home, oftentimes, Ms. Galloway and I, there's a standard letter that we send. We modify it based on the situation, but I always ask, parents, please check your children. Check the book bag, whether it's a BB gun, a pellet gun, a plastic gun, a belt buckle. There are just so many different items that are existing in our communities today. I don't know if you all know, but there's a belt buckle that when you take the buckle out, it's a knife on the inside. So we can search all day, but if that item is not recognized as a weapon, we're going to continue to experience these matters. So I just think that, you know, again, as a community, collectively, parents, that's why we are engaging in the piece with the guns approach. Lock your guns. Lock your weapons. Children don't go to the bubblegum machine to get the weapons. They're accessible to them. Lock the guns, and not just because they're being brought to school, but the percentage of the presentation that we did a couple of weeks ago, the percentage of children who are losing their lives because they're playing with a gun and they're thinking it's a toy, it is absolutely unbelievable. And so we will continue to have the conversation about wanding, working with our police department and our sheriff's department regarding the wands, regarding the metal detectors. There are some folks out there in research that says metal detectors don't work. There are some who say that metal detectors do work. And, you know, there is nothing out there that solidifies that says it safeguards our schools. But we will continue to revisit our practice to make sure that students are doing what they're expected to do, but we as adults are doing our part as well. I will also say that as we're moving forward, you know, we have several hotlines where you can report. If it's a bullying situation, we have access to Sprigeo. We invest in Sprigeo, and I don't have the data in front of me, but we don't have very many individuals who use Sprigeo just to report incidents of concern. So we have several supports in place when they're reported to us appropriately. And so when you talk about the weapons being discussed, they're being discussed, but we've not had any. Please. We've not had any. Many of them are just rumors from Facebook.
Any additional questions? I'd like to just make a statement. I'd like to thank you for that report along with Mr. Ray. And I think all of us can benefit from that. And one thing I'm proud of is that as a board, when we hear of things, we try to make sure that we put it in the hands of the administration. Like I always tell people, I am so sorry, Lord have mercy. Like I always tell them that there are some things that I don't do, and I do not get into personnel, and I don't get into some of the other things, but I do make sure that I send it to the persons that I feel that should handle that. And, you know, oftentimes I will respond that I will refer your concern to the administration, because I try to stay within my limits and let those who are trained in that area handle those things. So, board members, please continue to do what you're doing and make sure that we report things as they come to our attention. We do appreciate that, and thank you, Dr. Martin.
Yes, ma'am, and there's another piece. Mr. Williams, I know I'm putting you or Mr. Myers on the spot, but I believe it was last year where a circuit court judge ruled that students should not be arrested, and we're violating their rights for those things that were classified as disruptive. Do you have that report in front of you, Mr. Williams, or do you know the date off the top of your head when it changed? You can come up to the table. We won't bite.
I don't have the exact date, but you cannot disrupt a school in South Carolina if you are enrolled in school unless the behavior that you displayed, you did it while under suspension. So one of the main offenses law enforcement used to use was disruption of school, but they can't use that anymore. It's only if you're not enrolled in that particular school or you're enrolled and you're under suspension can you be charged with disruption of school. And that dates back, I think 2 years now, that's been the case. So most law enforcement, you see, they'll do a breach of peace, but for its disruption of school, that is not a charge that you can use in K-12 or collegiate.
Ms. Addison, is there anything you would like to contribute? Ms. Addison actually focuses on so many items, but one of her areas of focus is engaging our students as we expect them to come to school. Ms. Addison, would you like to reveal anything that you captured from the review of attendance data? I know I put you on the spot, I apologize.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I didn't bring the numbers with me. Only thing I would say is, as a district, we are working together to look at our schools comprehensively to identify trends at the school level, at the school levels, whether it's middle schools, trends within all of our high schools, as it relates to discipline, academics, and attendance, so that we can identify those issues collectively and work to problem solve. Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, sure.
Where are we now with the old concept of taking parents to court for truancy with kids? I know we kind of put it on hold because of the pandemic, and the courts were not doing that. So is that back on track, or is that still something that we're not doing?
Yes, sir. That process has continued this year. It began in January, so our first court date was January 13th. And we just had our last court date, May 12th, as a matter of fact.
Do they set a limit on how many cases you can carry?
Yes, so it's 10 per court date. And so we've had 3 court dates thus far.
And how do we look with our numbers carrying kids or parents?
Well, I do maximize the 10. They give me 10 slots, and so those 10 slots have been maximized with each of those 3 court dates.
And are you seeing a pattern as you research that this is a continuation with the same folks and the same kids, even starting down at the elementary level?
Well, I'll say this is my first year with this set of parents, so I can't say if these individuals were taken in the past. But what I can say is the individuals that we've taken to court have been truant previously. And so looking at their records, in the previous years, they were identified as truants. So it's been a progressive problem.
Thank you.
Yes.
And to your point, Dr. Baker, one of the things that Ms. Addison has been tasked with is really, again, to be proactive and to get underneath the reason why the children aren't coming to school, to provide supports to those parents, because we don't know what those lived experiences are for our families. And so before we jump to taking them to court, putting supports in place, whether it's connecting them with the social worker, it could be a fact that the children haven't had anything to eat, clothing, all those other factors, homelessness. We've been looking at our homeless population because we know that it has increased, but the reporting has decreased, making sure that there are no other barriers that are getting in the way of children coming to school, as opposed to them just being treated as if they're violating the law just intentionally. And so we've been making sure that we support our parents and our families before we take them to court, but we've definitely been taking them to court. And so thank you, Ms. Addison, for always being there doing that difficult task. I actually found the article that I was referring to, and the title of it, and I'm just putting this out here for the community, Law Against Disorderly Conduct in Schools Led to Unfair Student Arrests, a judge rules. And this was just in October of 2021. A federal judge sided with South Carolina students who argued that broadly written state laws against disorderly conduct in disturbing schools allowed police to arrest and cite students for routine misbehaviors. I'm not going to read the article, but I encourage you to read it, to familiarize yourself not only with the law, but the ways in which we've adjusted how we address student misbehavior and disorderly conduct in our schools. And so, again, Dr. Jackson, I apologize, but I know I had staff here and I didn't want them here for nothing. I just wanted to make sure they could get up to the desk.
Very well done. Thank you, Ms. Addison.
Thank you.
Exercising your powers.
Yes, ma'am, that's called true power. So at this time, I'd like Ms. Miller to come to the desk, the wonderful desk. And if Ms. Miller, if you could do 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, 4.5, 4.6, 4.7, I'm glad you're there because they won't have a chance with everything that you have to do. And I'll just publicly say, you know, I appreciate you and thank you for all the work that you do for Sumter School District.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, Chairwoman Dr. Barbara Jackson, Vice Chairman Dr. Frank Baker, honorable board members, and Superintendent Dr. Martin Knox. This evening, we have the April 30th, 2022 revenue and expenditures for the general fund. The revenue projections changed by approximately $118,000 since last month's report. $58,000 of that change was in state revenue, and it is related to the state's revised projections. The other $60,000 was in local revenue, and the majority of that was in our rebate for Black River Electric, $27,000, and our virtual card rebate, $14,000. This brings the total revenue projection for June 30th, 2022 to $127,016,304. Moving on to expenditures. The expenditures varied slightly by $20,000 from last month's projections. The other financing sources also changed slightly by approximately $27,000, which was a revised projection from the State Department as well. Based on the previously discussed adjustments in the projections, the change in the fund balance is projected to be $1,371,669, which would bring the fund balance to $33,998,400 as of June 30th, 2022. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions for Mrs. Miller?
All right, moving on to the next item. You have a letter that is requesting a credit limit increase to the Sumter School District corporate account 1188. Currently, we have a $50,000 credit limit, and we, with the growth in our district and our finance needs based on vendors taking credit card payments and requesting credit card payments, we are requesting that that limit be increased to $100,000, and the action is necessary to meet those needs, and we are just asking the board to approve that this evening. The next item is your capital projects update. You should have funds 519 through 527 in front of you, and if you have any questions on those, I will be happy to answer those.
Any questions?
If I may.
Sure. Dr. Hilden?
Follow up on the recommendation of the Finance Committee and the Facilities Committee about an alignment of the facility study from 2018 with the capital project. I'm sorry, thank you. An alignment of the facility study and the capital projects budget. We are moving forward on that, or what's the status of that?
I believe both committees were bringing that to the board as a total, and then the board would make that request to administration. That was a recommendation from the committees. Is that correct?
So is that an action item on our agenda this evening?
I think it is.
I would think that's an action for the administration as opposed to board action, but I could be mistaken.
There are certain items, line items in there, in terms of transference, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Miller, that some of those items transfer function. Do they all transfer function, or are they within that same formula?
I think we're talking about two separate things. When we're talking about transfers in the capital projects, we do bring those to the board's attention if it's a project that isn't being worked on and we're moving it to
Right.
another
No,
project.
that's not what we're
But
talking
this is from both committees last week, the facility and the finance committee, both recommended that the facility study line up with the capital project budgets and doing an evaluation on that.
Yeah, we're requesting a report of how the capital projects expenditures, the money we have allocated in capital projects, is aligning with the study in 2018 that said we need to do A, B, C, X, Y, Z. So are the money we have allocated in capital projects, how is it aligning with the study that said these are the things we need to do? And I don't think that requires any board action. I think that would be a function of the administration would provide the board with that information, is what we're asking.
So what we've been doing for all the projects, we have been using that facility study. If we go back and look at any of the other minutes or the other recorded sessions, we have talked about the alignment of the work that's taking place with the facility study. What we have been doing, though, is prioritizing based on need. The facility study just tells us what needs to be done, and we have to take a look at it with our staff to determine which one takes precedence and takes priority. So we have been using it, but I can definitely make sure that it's documented through the facilities committee, which is why we were actually doing the school visits, so that we can prioritize those items that were identified in the facility study. But we have definitely been using the facility study, and I think Dr. Reagan even mentioned the other day in the facilities meeting that he wanted a hard copy, and I suggested that we get them the electronic copy, and that was going to be something that we were going to do so that we can ensure that the work that we're doing is aligned to that work. We invested in that project, and it's very informative information. And so we have been using that document, or those documents, if you will, to guide our work.
Yes, ma'am. And so what we're requesting is a report on how you have been using it so that we can see that the study said we need this, this, and this, and then over here, we've spent money on this, this, and this, so we see we're matching up. That's what we're requesting.
Consider it done, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on that? If not, Mrs. Miller?
All right, moving on to the procurement audit. You have the June 30th, 2021 procurement report in front of you. This audit was performed by Malden and Jenkins, our CPA firm that also does our financial audit. And if you look on page 1 of their report, you can see there, in our opinion, the district complied in all material respects requirements for the year ended June 30th, 2021. I'd like to thank our procurement team and all our bookkeepers and principals and everybody working in finance for a successful report with no findings. Any questions?
Hearing none, I'd just like to say thanks to you and your staff for making sure that those things are done in an expeditious manner, and we're all clear there. Thank you.
So, if I may, so in the jargon of the business, we received a clean audit.
Yes, sir. And when
Thank
it
you.
says in our opinion, that's a
Right.
professional opinion, not just their
Right.
regular
Thank you.
opinion.
You may
All
you may
right.
proceed.
Item 4.6 is the fiscal year 23 fiscal budget update. There really is no change from last week when I presented to the board. As you know, state legislators are out right now. They will not be returning till mid-June, so there's no information to report on a revised revenue projection. Additionally, I am waiting on reports from the county to be able to accurately calculate the value of a mill. It has been noted that a tentative schedule of a meeting for the district to present the budget to the county is June 14th. We will not have state revenue numbers by that point because the state is reconvening on that day, and I doubt they will have time to pass a budget in one day. The board does have some options. The first option you have is to approve a continuing resolution at the June 13th board meeting to allow the new administration to have input on the budget and to wait for the state legislators to pass the budget. The other option is to continue forward with preliminary figures, knowing that it could be the Senate version, it could be the House version, it could be the House's second version, or some combination of, and be prepared to call a special board meeting the last week of June, and hope that the legislators have had time to pass a budget at that point. And if they have not, then you would pass a continuing resolution at that point.
Yes, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to comment, you know, we had your report last week, and as a result, we voted to ask county council for the 10.9 mills. I've gotten a lot of negative feedback, citing that because this board is, as many people view as dysfunctional, I don't think we are, but because we've had some controversy and had some split votes. But I've also seen comments about the money is for the school board. And I just wanted to make the comment that the money we're asking for is to help the students, because all of that will go to the operations. It's money that we need, or we wouldn't be requesting it. So I just wanted to make that comment, because a lot of times people get the idea for some reason that we're asking for the money for ourselves, but it does go to the schools, and we feel like that, you know, we want to do everything we can for the students and staff. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ray. Any other comments?
Yes, if I may.
Yes, Dr. Hilton?
Thank you. In light of the fact that we've had a pandemic for the last 2.5 years, many of our students have fallen behind because of their lack of face time in the classroom, because we had to be out of school and do virtual instruction for such a long period of time. One of the things that I think we need this 10.9 mills for is to reduce teacher-pupil ratios, so that we have fewer kids in the class, that we can catch our kids up. These kids are behind through no fault of their own because they were out of school. So when we look at how we're going to utilize this millage increase, one of my thoughts would be is we need to enhance instruction, provide opportunities for kids to catch up, reduce teacher-pupil ratios so we can provide more individualized instruction for our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hilton.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Rolston?
just to piggyback on something that Dr. Hilton touched on, as far as reducing the student-teacher ratio in the classrooms, but I think we also have to take into account that with our financial woes of the district, that we made cuts to personnel. We then came back with a recovery plan, and we made cuts to programs. To balance our budget, we've implemented freezes on hiring and filling vacancies, and now we're having a discussion where we potentially may have to do the same thing again to put freezes on vacancies. So we can't have it both ways. We can't reduce student-teacher ratio and implement a freeze on vacancies that we desperately need, not to mention that we're still in a pandemic and we're in a national teacher shortage. So that's something that I think that we need to keep in mind moving forward when we have this discussion about the budget, is that putting a freeze on hiring staff or eliminating staff is only going to exacerbate that problem of student to teacher ratio, and it contributes to the burnout of staff. And we hear from our educators every day, they're covering classes, they're not getting breaks, but we're contributing to that as a board. So we have to take that into consideration as well. So if that is something that we're hearing and that we need to address, then that option of putting a freeze on vacancies is not a viable option. Thank you.
So,
Right.
if I may, so what you're saying, Mr. Olson, is that you and I are in agreement?
Take note on it.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, board members, for the comments and input. We do appreciate that. Ms. Miller, would you continue, please?
Yes, ma'am. We have item 4.7, which is a athletic repairs presentation, and Mr. Myers is going to join me, and we are going to do this together.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr.
For
Myers.
several weeks, there have been requests to bring about information in reference to Title IX. We have been looking at a number of items that have been brought to our attention, and some of the things that are out there, have been brought to our attention. And so with the number of things that are there, we classified those as athletic repairs because all of those areas are falling under athletics. One of our most important pieces was to make sure that our athletic teams were balanced in all of the different things that they had with the fields and all of the working equipment and different things like that. So the information that we've shared as far as athletic repairs, that was shared with you. That in itself, and I'll just share just a few of those. When we talk about bullpen fencing, that was a part of what the baseball team had at all of our 3 high schools, but the softball teams did not have those, so we needed to bring all of those in a line, and we've done that. Gravel dust is just an area where you beautify the area behind the backstop. We took care of that because it was there in one area but not in the other, and we wanted to balance that off. You'll notice that at Crestwood High School, we did not do that because the coach said the grass looked so beautiful. She did not want to change that, and that's how we left that. So at some point, we may make that adjustment depending on how that goes. So they are okay with that. As we continued to move, we looked at softball school boards. Baseball school boards were purchased some years ago, and the softball school boards were dilapidated, bulbs out, and so we needed to bring all of that into a line, and we've done that. We have the school boards, and they will be installed this summer. As we continue to move, painting of our dugouts, making sure that signage is in those particular areas. We invite you to go to our 3 high schools and look at our softball and baseball areas and see the beautification pieces that have been done. Yes, there are some things that we need to do to catch up with some other areas, and those are some of our big ticket items. And if you can go to the next slide. Our big ticket items, one of the areas that was most distressing was that with baseball, at one of our schools, our softball players, our young ladies, had to walk almost 100 yards just to get to a concession stand or to a restroom area. In order to bring that into a line, we would have to build a building that would be be able to give us concession, restrooms, and storage space. And that is in itself is listed, and that's one of the bigger ticket items. One of the other areas was the backstops. When all of that was done many years ago, they did not take into consideration that one area was outshining the others, and we have to make sure that we can bring our softball teams into line with our baseball. And if we do that, then we will be having to construct softball backstops, and there's some costliness that goes along with that, and it's there. And at this point, I'm going to pause and let Ms. Miller talk about the areas where we can provide those funds so we can do the things that we need to do.
Yes, we've identified 3 funds that have some funding available to assist with this. The first one is Fund 524. This is where we had the metal detectors budgeted for $200,000 that was mentioned previously. We also have Fund 525. There is $12,000 left in there for other facility needs. And then Fund 526, this is other facility needs, and the amount in that is $723,000. So those were 3 areas that you could do a combination of, or just obviously you could do it all from item 3.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Austin?
for funding option 3, where it says other facility needs for 723, what was that funding for or set aside for?
So that was funds that we had set aside for another project that came from the 8% bond last year. There was another project that we were proposing, but we never moved forward with it, so that money is still being kept to the side and not being utilized. So that's where we were going to take the monies from.
If I could push her a little further, was this an academic project that we discussed, or an opportunity? I'm just trying to get some clarification exactly to refresh my memory of what the project was.
If you would add a letter C that says all of the above.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any additional questions? If not,
Yes, I have a question.
yes, Dr.
Does this
Goodwin?
require board action to approve the source of the funding to come from 526, for example?
It technically, that money was set aside for other facility needs as deemed appropriate by administration, so it technically does not need board approval, but we did bring it to the board's attention so that you could have input.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions? If not, thank you, Mrs. Miller and Mr. Myers, for your report.
And Dr. Jackson, that concludes the superintendent's reports.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Martin Knox, and your staff for a thorough report this evening. We do really appreciate the hard work of all of our people that have contributed and continues to work hard. And thank you so much for your leadership. Okay, that being said, we are now down to executive session. Per our agenda, the board will now enter into executive session. As a reminder, there's no set time frame that this portion of the meeting will take, and we invite the in-person guests as well as our online viewers to join us again when we return to open session. If you're unable to be with us at that time, we wish that you have a pleasant week. Trustees, is there a motion to enter into executive session?
Madam Chairwoman, I move that we enter into executive session for discussion of compensation, employment, release, and transfer of certified and classified employees, individual student matters, transfers in, out of district, proposed property contractual matter, receipt of legal advice concerning a pending claim on behalf of Dr. Martin Knox, as needed, and as needed, receipt of legal advice concerning pending suit on behalf of the Sumter County concerned clergy and others.
There is a motion and a second that the board enters into executive session for the discussion of compensation, employment, release, and transfer of certified and classified I am sorry.
Somebody,
Did someone second it?
now they did.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dr. Lee, you seconded it. All right, I'm ahead of the gun. There is a motion and a second. Motion by Dr. Bacon, second by Dr. Lee, that the board enters into executive session for the discussion of compensation, employment, release and transfer of certified and classified employees, individual student matters, transfer in and out of district, proposed property contractual matters, receipt of legal advice concerning a pending claim on behalf of Dr. Martin Knox as needed, and as needed, receipt of legal advice concerning pending suit on behalf of the Sumter School District, Sumter County concerned clergy and others. Is there any discussion? If not, please cast your vote. The motion passes unanimously, and the board is now executive session items. Dr. Martin Knox, personnel. You have a recommendation?
Yes, ma'am, Dr. Jackson. I ask the board to approve the personnel report and the property contractual matters as presented in executive session.
You gotta split those up. They need to be separated.
Yeah, one. Do
As
personnel
he
first.
said, I ask the board to approve the personnel report as presented in executive session.
Madam Chairwoman, I move that we approve and accept Dr. Martin Knox's recommendation for the personnel report as presented.
It has been moved and second that we accept the personnel report as presented. Are there any questions? Please cast your vote. Okay, the motion passes unanimously. All righty.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the board authorize Dr. Martin Knox to proceed with the proposed contractual matter.
Second.
It has been a motion and second that the board authorize Dr. Martin Knox to proceed with the proposed contractual property matter. Are there any questions or discussion? If not, please cast your vote. If you can't get it, Shirley.
She's not gonna stop until she can, so.
We could just vote, show of hands. Okay, the motion passes unanimously. We're now down to 7.2, individual student matter, transfers in and out of district. Dr. Martin Knox?
Yes, ma'am, Dr. Jackson, I ask the board to approve the student matters for transferring in and out of district as presented in executive session.
Madam Chair, I ask that the board accepts the superintendent's recommendation to approve the individual student matters transfers into and out of district.
Second.
Okay, there is a motion and a second that the board approves individual student matter transfer in and out of district. Is there any discussion? Please cast your vote. The motion passes unanimously. 7.3, credit card limits increase on Sumter School District corporate account 1188.
Madam Chairwoman,
Yes, ma'am.
I move that the board approve the credit card limit increase from $50,000 to $100,000 on Sumter School District corporate account 1188.
Second.
There is a motion and a second that the board approves the credit card limit increase from $50,000 to $100,000 on Sumter School District corporate account 1188. Is there any discussion? Please cast your vote. The motion passes unanimously. We're now down to the consent agenda. With no objection, the consent agenda will stand approved. Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. I'd like to thank each of you for joining us this evening. I ask that you please continue to be safe. And with no further business, this meeting is adjourned at 8:26 p.m. Have a good evening.